Have you seen this? A historical military conflict where a regimented imperial force expands to subjugate a native population and Britain is the defender?
Welcome to Have You Seen This?
The world's only podcast about obscure, overlooked, and misbegotten media.
All discussions will be spoiler heavy.
You have been warned.
This show would not be possible without the support of our patrons. If you would like to support our show, join us at patreon.com/haveyouseenthis. For just $5 a month, get access to our Discord and all 3 episodes every month covering movies you've never heard of, or maybe wish you hadn't.
Yeah.
Boom! That's exactly right.
That was pretty good.
Tim's ready for his AP test.
Right, yeah. That's my biggest takeaway from this was, I'm not sure who the bad guy is, but Jen, why don't you tell us why we're talking about Centurion this episode?
I don't think the movie really knows who the bad guy is, and it should be easy. But in order to explicate, we have a special guest this week. I'm very excited about this because I love having on people who are smarter than I am because I don't have to work as hard. So we have, from the wonderful Tribunate channel on YouTube, Gaius. Gaius, welcome to the show.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Tim, and thanks for having me on. I will do my best. I am not a film buff. I devote my time to history, so I'm glad that we can cross over here, but I am not smart as it comes to like film and angles and directors and all that stuff. So I'm sure y'all will teach me a thing or two about how to critique an actual film.
We're the opposite, yeah. So we'll integrate our forces and create a
Yes.
combined front to fend off any attacks against our lack of knowledge.
Hopefully we'll do a better job defending off attacks than the Romans did in this movie, because they got owned repeatedly.
Right, yeah.
Again and again.
Why did we choose 2010's Centurion for this episode?
I think, this is something, I'm really glad that y'all both mentioned it, because it was something I actually noticed when I watched the movie again, is this movie doesn't know who the bad guy is. And I felt like this was such a great encapsulation of like UK politics in 2010, kind of, because they're British, so building an empire and subjugating natives is good, but then it's like, oh, but they're doing it to us. And so it's like, they're savages, but they're kind of right. And the movie can't make up its mind of, is this imperial machine that's like marching over the natives, is it a good thing? Is it bringing civilization, or should they even be there to begin with? So it's so scattershot, it's so schizophrenic that you guys are totally right about that.
Yeah, it's just a thing to do. Where it seems like the protagonist should be, it's a group of Roman soldiers who are trapped behind enemy lines, and they're trying to get back to their fortification before they're hunted by these grotesque heathen savages. And you're like, well, these are kind of people defending their home, so fuck them. It's kind of my attitude.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt the entire time. I'm like, it's like, oh, you don't want to get butchered by like a Scottish warrior? Don't go to Scotland.
Yeah,
you don't belong
really
there.
easy. Yeah,
that's your problem, man.
Yeah,
yeah, and if I've learned anything from Tribunate, which again, highly, highly recommend because it's a cut above the usual YouTube fodder.
Speaks in complete sentences.
A lot to say about
no labored extended metaphors.
Yeah, Gaius knows how to like use and say words, which is nice for a YouTuber and not as common as you would think. But yeah, like there's a lot of really fascinating history on the Tribunate channel. Less so in this movie, because what I've learned from Tribunate is that the Romans were kind of dicks.
that is
their
very
society
generous.
was kind of their society was kind of fucked up. So when you start this movie, you're kind of like, okay, and because I am eternally optimistic, I'm like, okay, like maybe this will turn into a story about the forces of an imperial power gradually coming to understand and maybe even respect their opponent a little bit, the insurgency.
Has that ever happened?
Well, as Tim likes to say to me all the time whenever I try to read into a movie or analyze it, he says, It ain't that kind of movie, kid. And
Yeah.
it sure isn't, because I think we're supposed to identify with our hero, played by Michael Fassbender, because he's good looking and he's shredded, and that's about it. That there isn't much else to this character apart from the fact that he is a Roman centurion kind of pressed into a leadership role.
Right. For historical reasons, I'm curious, guys, if you had any insight into what the conditions were sending Roman soldiers out to fight or to conquer Britain, because my understanding of it is pretty much just based on movies, because as Jen will attest, I don't read.
Yeah, we're both illiterate.
Yeah, I only know history from TV and movies. So I know Boudica, I know horrible histories,
Okay.
but that is about my understanding of it. My assumption is that it's a shit job to be sent to conquer Britain. Like, this is where like the people whose careers are kind of on the slide get kind of sent over to conquer Britain. It sounds like it's a lousy job.
Yeah, so the movie they kind of even address that, I think one of them even says, what are we even doing here, which is like the closest they get to self-reflection of, hey, maybe this like imperialist venture is not actually going to help us or them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
It's just something we do.
basically, yeah, exactly. I was bored. Basically, the actual history behind it is, it's the copy and paste Roman history of like, oh, they have something I want, I'm just gonna take it. Like, there was not a. I think now when the U.S. or the U.K. or anybody intervenes abroad, there's these grand notions of like, oh, we're doing it to spread democracy and freedom and development, and we're bringing women's rights and gay rights to these places. Back then, it was much more simpler. You didn't need to disguise anything, right? It's like, oh, they've got stuff. I would like them to be my slaves, and I want their gold. Was basically all the justification you needed to kind of like march in and take over a place. But these campaigns in Scotland that are depicted in this movie are pretty interesting, because they conquered southern Britain, which is, more or less analogous to modern day England, but they couldn't quite penetrate up to, the farthest north regions. That's partly because the terrain was so hostile, and also partly because there just wasn't anything worth stealing up there. It was too sparsely populated, and they basically just gave up, and they're like, all right, this is not worth our time or efforts.
No, they really wanted that oatmeal and sheep's stomachs.
Yeah, right. The haggis, why not just complete the set and get all of Britain so you can enjoy haggis?
And this was pre-tartan even, so like,
Yeah.
they're not even getting fabric, but
But this event that's kind of the centerpiece of the movie, this legion getting mauled by the Scottish Highland warriors, is actually historically accurate for the most part. A legion that was stationed in Britain disappeared from the historical record around the time that Hadrian's Wall was first constructed. So their last record is in, like, I think 120, the year 120, and construction of Hadrian's Wall begins around that same time. And so there's a lot of theories of like, well, this legion just drops off from the historical record. They were stationed in the far north of England. Maybe they were drawn into a battle, into a trap like this, and that was that. And then they decided to kind of consolidate. Hadrian, the emperor, visited England, Britannia, after this. And maybe that's when they decided to kind of consolidate defenses. Again, we don't know exactly what happened to the legion, but that is one of the leading theories, is that they were just completely destroyed and it was never really mentioned.
Yeah, and I think, as I said to you before we started recording, that's why this movie kind of strikes me as like a reverse 300, because it's about a small force of indomitable heroes against crushing odds, but they get erased from history instead of becoming immortal through history. Also, it's a reverse 300 because and far be it for me to ever defend Zack Snyder, apart from his only good movie, Dawn of the Dead. That's right, I said it. But this movie completely lacks the visual flair of 300.
Completely.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, you can get 2 extra episodes every month, plus access to our growing catalog of reviews for just $5 a month by going to patreon.com and searching for "Have you seen this?"